evening and welcome to our program. Today we have Minister of Legal Affairs and Attorney General, the Honorable Basil Williams with us, who will give us some insights on the recent ruling by the CCJ. Minister, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sinika.
Right off, what is your immediate reaction to yesterday's ruling?
Well, of course, we're satisfied with the ruling, and I believe that the court responded to most of the submissions that we made at this level in terms of the consequential orders. And we also believe it's a victory for our constitutional democracy.
The court spoke of an interim government. Could you expound on that so the Guyanese people can understand?
Well, an interim government is one that they say should be the mode after a successful no confidence motion. And our Constitution, of course, gives us no guidance on that matter. But the President of the Court, Chief Justice Saunders, did refer to that mode in his judgment. And he, in fact, referred us to the decision of the Chancellor, Madam Justice Unit Cummins, at the Court of Appeal level of the hearing of the motion. And she had referred to a Canadian expert on the constitutional law of Canada, I think Peter Hogg, and he too spoke about the interim government coming after a successful no confidence motion. Justice Saunders, Chief Justice Saunders, did not elaborate or detail anything in his judgment. And the Chancellor didn't also, but did refer us to the book. And on a proper perusal of the book, they say clearly that the government retains its panoply of powers because it has to continue governing. You know, in Guyana, we have to continue governing lest we are overrun by the narco traffickers, those who traffic in persons, you know, of course, because of the porosity of our borders. And the whole question of money laundering and other serious crime. So the government there cannot be a lapse in government when you threaten with such serious transnational crimes. And of course, we have a border controversy, and we have other serious issues. So, piracy, we have more or less dealt with that, but we still have to be on guard. And of course, you could have natural disasters. You could have any large crowd involvement in disturbances and the like. So a government must be there to continue governance until the next elections are held.
AG, can you expound on why the need for the government to remain in office? I know we have a budget, we have programs to roll out. Could you tell the public why is there a need for the government to remain in office?
Well, as I said earlier, that the government needs to be there to continue to govern. You must have law and order. But of course, the government primarily is there to offer and deliver services to the public as a whole, and health services, you name it, some social services and the like. So government is important. We have to continue to govern, and as I said earlier, and so that there would be no interregnum that could cause serious infractions because there's no government.
Let's go back to the courts. There were some submissions made by the lawyers representing the opposition leader, asking for the government to resign, and election should be held within 18 months and the like. What was the mood What was the response like in the court?
Well, of course, those orders that were sought by the opposition, the leader of the opposition, lawyers in particular, included one that the government and cabinet should resign. Of course, the court, on a proper interpretation of Articles 106.6 and 106.7, concluded otherwise, and the learned Chief Justice did say that the tenure of the cabinet, including the president, post a no confidence motion, would be like that of an interim government. So he clearly has shown that the cabinet and the president will continue in government even after a successful no confidence motion, albeit in a somewhat changed role that they call the interim government. They also ask for coercive orders, that is orders that will direct the president, for example, to name an election date. That power is given to the president under the Constitution, and only the president could proclaim a date for an election. But they are asking the court to direct the president to fix an election date not later than the 18th of September. And of course, the court refused to do that. In addition to that, they wanted the court to coerce the government to hold elections within 3 months, too. And also, the courts refused to do that. The courts, in effect, were saying that they couldn't make a coercive order or give detailed directives to these constitutional actors because their roles are outlined there in the Constitution. And let me say, our Constitution is the supreme law of the land. And this Constitution was the result of a referendum in 1980, which produced the 1980 Constitution. And you will find that the Constitution entrenches a lot of those powers that the president has, for example, that the Parliament has, and also GECOM, that it gives the exclusive remit to conduct elections and registration, national registration in Guyana. So it was a very important decision by the CCJ because it reinforces the doctrine of the separation of powers, that is, between the president and cabinet, the judiciary, and the legislature. And you know the doctrine is that none should trample on the other or interfere with the other. And in fact, the Chief Justice himself, when he was a puisne judge, had an excellent decision which outlined the importance of no arm overstepping onto the other. And so what they were asking, what the opposition leader was asking the court to do, the CCJ, was to overstep and overreach and interfere with the executive. And you know, on our Constitution, the president is an executive of one. We have this hybrid constitution, somewhat akin to the United States and France, where we have an executive president. So it's a very important judgment, and it's a great victory for our constitutional democracy when the court refused to issue any coercive order or detailed directives. And in relation to GECOM, another constitutional actor, they also felt that they couldn't issue deadlines and timelines to GECOM. They expect GECOM as a responsible constitutional actor who would execute their functions and their responsibilities with integrity. So those things that were asked for the court to intrude into the independent powers provided for by our Constitution and certain actors, the courts quite rightfully refused to do so. We did ask them not to enter into the realm Because largely we're asking the court to enter into a political arena, fixing election dates, determining lists. So that was another thing. They were asking the court to direct what lists must be used by GECOM for the upcoming elections, and the courts didn't venture into that area at all.
Okay. The issue with the GECOM chairman, um, there were talks between the government and representatives from the government and the opposition. Um, there were no consensus. The president said that there can be a GECOM chairman by Monday. What are your thoughts on this? Will the president and the opposition meet soon?
Well, the president did indicate he's ready to meet. In fact, from the outset, the president had indicated his willingness to meet and determine that issue. Of course, you know, you can't have an election. GECOM can't do much if there's no chairman, because the chairman largely has to sign off on many things in the process in arriving at a national register or election list. And from the outset, the president said he will follow the directions of the CCJ. And you would recall that the CCJ, in looking at Article 161(2), said that the process under which Justice Patterson was appointed was flawed. What was this process? The process was one in which the leader of the opposition alone composed a list of 6 persons which he thought were not unacceptable to the president. And then he would present this list to the president. Of course, that happened 3 times, and the president couldn't find anyone that he could identify from the 3 lists. And so the president was forced to resort to the proviso, where he could have made the appointment of Justice Patterson. Well, the total process, the court said, was flawed. Not that one act of appointing Justice Patterson under the proviso. So the whole principle that underpinned the CCJ's reasoning was that, looking at the history of the legislation in Ghana, they felt that there was a substantial shift from exclusivity and unilateralism to consensualism and inclusivity. So that it meant then that the president, the Jagdeo, as lead, not Jagdeo, the leader of the opposition would have a role in determining what the candidate or who the candidate should be, as well as the president would have a role. And so what they said is that both persons must get together, communicate with each other, or even meet to hammer out a list of 6 names which meet the eligibility requirements under the Constitution and which were not unacceptable to the president. So it's not a situation in which the leader of the opposition has been unaffected by the movement from unilateralism to consensualism, and only the president has been affected by him. He has been affected because they are saying, that is the court's process now is, before the leader of the opposition hands over the list formally to the president, the 2 men must meet and hammer out a list of 6 names. And it's important that the directions given by the CCJ are followed so that the process could be speeded up. And as I said to you, the president is ready, willing, and able to continue in the process to arrive at the chairman of GECOM.
Let's look at, government has been presenting a budget every year during the month of December. What does this mean for budget 2020? And what does it mean for international negotiations and investors and so on? How do we move forward?
Well, my understanding is an interim government, you do things in relation to policy, expenditure, appointments, that are routine, and the routine business of government would continue. So I don't think it includes any signing of international treaties or any major a Milo type project, that type of thing one would expect would occur in an interim government. But generally, as they said, the full panoply of the powers of the government must be necessary so that there is good governance and citizens could be secured and feel secured in Guyana.
Okay, so the government stance is...
In terms of the budget, there are many things. You have supplementary budgets, you could have the December budget. These are things we'll have to, having a budget is routine, for example.
Yeah.
So these are things we still have to flesh out, and we're looking at it, fleshing out the real essence of an interim government. Bearing in mind that you retain your full panoply of powers and the need to continue governing to secure the country, in the public interest, the country's public security, the country's border, and the welfare and well-being of the people of the country. So it's only until the next elections are held. And of course, that is an issue that GECOM will have to advise the president on as to its ability when, where, and how. Elections, credible elections could be held by them with a credible list. So it's up to GECOM to inform the president of its readiness.
What about Parliament?
Well, Parliament is unaffected by Articles 1066 and 1067, save to the extent that if the 3 months on 1067 are to be extended for the holding of elections, the period for that, you would require a 2/3 majority of the Parliament to extend by any period. The extension is not limited to another 3 months, for example. It says you could, by 2/3 majority, extend the 3 months, but it doesn't give any limit. There's no limit placed on the time for extension. So it doesn't say another 3 months, for example. Because I think the drafters recognize that if you have to conduct an election in 3 months, it probably would be difficult anyway. And if you're going to get an extension in order to hold the elections, then you might as well get all the parties together, GECOM, etc., and actually have a definitive idea as to when the elections could be held. And that could possibly be more than 3 months. So it's all up to GECOM, really.
Okay. Cabinet has approved a number of critical bills to be laid in the National Assembly. Can we see those bills be going to the National Assembly anytime soon?
Yes, well, unless there's the recess comes up on August 10th, so there's still time to hold at least a session or so. As I said, Parliament is unaffected in all of this discussion.
Okay, so let's go back to a bit on the elections and the list. Government has said that we will not, there is need for a list. Could you expound on that, of a government stance on ensuring a clean list before we move forward?
Well, the government stance is that there must be a credible list for the elections. And what does a credible list entail? It certainly would entail having persons who now reach the age of 18 being included, that persons who are deceased, and persons who no longer qualify to be on the list. For example, that they are no longer resident in the registration area in which they live, that, you know, the list, those deletions be dealt with. And so a credible list is what is required to hold free and fair elections in Guyana.
Okay, over the past 2 or 3 months, we've seen the government going out into the communities and, you know, updating the people and getting critical issues resolved within on the ground. Will we be moving forward with these outreaches, given given what has happened with the ruling and everything?
Yeah, so basically we are in elections mode, and there's nothing to cause us not to continue to go on ministerial outreaches. As you know, the government remains in office until a president is sworn in. So the governmental work is still necessary and is still required.
Okay, AG. As we wrap up, any final thing you would like to say to the Guyanese people?
No, I think I should have elaborated a bit more on the list, because a lot of discussion has gone into how we would arrive at a credible list, and basically our legislation directs us to, when you have to include new portions on the list or delete, etc., the only way you could do that is by house-to-house visits, you know. But to the Guyanese people, I think we are now in a position to really move forward as a nation. The CCJ has spoken. You know, this was a process that started since 21st of December. We were, in fact, referred by the Honorable Speaker to the courts, and you know that the matter was before the Chief Justice in the first instance. We appealed to the Court of Appeal, and then the opposition appealed to the CCJ. So really and truly, it's a good, healthy thing for access to justice in Guyana, that persons could exhaust their remedies up to the highest court, the CCJ. And we believe now that the court having spoken, that we must all move forward now and try to get these elections out of the way. We have a lot in store for all of Guyana, and we should move forward and resolve our difficulties.
I am Seneca Thorne, and this has been another edition of One-on-One, where we spoke with the Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, the Honorable Basil Williams. Good evening.